Welcome to 1985. This year took me a little longer to get through because they've introduced a new series called Web of Spider-Man, so there were 9 issues of that I had to read in addition to the other 26 issues. So, I don't think I'm going to change the format as new things are added. It's just going to be longer reviews. But for the website, spiderman.erictoribio.com, I might have to start splitting up posts between several pages. Because I'm only allowed like 2,500 words per post, and I've had to cut back on my summaries previously to make it fit. So adding a whole new series is just going to make it impossible for me to fit it all into one post. So I have to split it up into 2, but videos will stay the same. Anyway, on with the review. Alright, so, in Amazing Spider-Man last year, it left off with Spider-Man preparing to battle against the Hobgoblin. So let's start off with issue 260 of Amazing Spider-Man, The Challenge of the Hobgoblin. The Hobgoblin wants copies of Norman Osborn's journals from Harry. He kidnaps Liz and Mary Jane as blackmail. Spider-Man fights Hobby, but then he gets away. Then in the next issue, 261, The Sins of My Father. Harry meets Hobgoblin with the journals. Hobgoblin then takes him to Liz and Mary Jane and locks him in with them. They try to escape, and then Spider-Man battles Hobgoblin, and after an explosion, Harry and the gals are trapped in a wall of fire, and Liz apparently goes into labor. Spider-Man abandons Hobby and saves them. Also, the symbiote escapes from the Fantastic Four's headquarters. I'm going to just say this, I really love the Hobgoblin. Maybe I said it before, I'm sure I'll say it again. But yeah, he's definitely another one of my very favorite villains. And the next issue, 262, Trade Secret. A photographer stumbles into a room where Spider-Man is changing out of his clothes and takes a picture of the unmasked Spidey. Spider-Man then hunts him down and scares him into giving up the negatives. Spectacular Spider-Man left off last year with the Kingpin angry at Spider-Man and Black Cat for preventing the cure of his wife's illness, and he vows for revenge. Issue 98 of Spectacular Spider-Man, True Confessions. Spider-Man and Black Cat fight some thugs during a blackout, and then Black Cat tells him she got her powers from Kingpin. Spider-Man isn't sure if he can stay with such an amoral girl who only loves his costume identity. Also, through trying to recreate the powers of Cloak, one of Kingpin's scientists accidentally creates an entrance into a dimension that's light with spots of darkness, so half and half. And when he comes back to our dimension, some of the spots stick to him, and yeah. Issue number 99, Spider on the Spot. When Spider-Man goes to Kingpin's building to talk or fight about Black Cat's remaining debt, he is attacked by the Spot, who wants to test his new powers of traversing the spotted dimension. Spider-Man can't get the edge on him, but the Spot isn't strong enough to really hurt Spidey. Also, the symbiote is diligently trying to find Spider-Man. Issue number 263, The Spectacular Spider-Kid. Ali Osnick, the kid that dressed like Dr. Octopus a while back, turns the Doc Ock tentacles into spider legs and dresses up as Spider-Man and goes crime fighting. He gets into some big trouble, meets up with the real Spidey, and decides to hang up the metal legs for good. Spider-Man briefly wears a cloth version of the black costume that Black Cat made for him the previous year. Liz has her baby, and it's a boy, and then Peter and Mary Jane are the godparents. Issue number 264, Red 9 and Red Tape. Spider-Man fights some kid with a superpowered suit who calls himself Red 9. Then he helps fix a computer glitch and let an old man stay in a nursing home instead of getting kicked out onto the street. They weren't kidding about that red tape part. Issue number 100 of Spectacular Spider-Man. Break-In. Spider-Man and Black Cat both visit Kingpin independently of each other. Spidey gets stopped on the roof by the Spot, but figures out a way to beat him. Then he fights Kingpin, and Kingpin agrees to leave Black Cat alone forever. Black Cat learns that her bad luck powers will make Spidey have worse and worse luck until he dies the longer they hang around each other. Before she can break up with him, he breaks up with her because he feels they are too different. She's too amoral and is only interested in the costumed, superpowered identity. They go their separate ways, and the symbiote crawls into Peter's closet just before he goes to grab his suit to go back out again. Issue number 1 of Web of Spider-Man, Till Death Do Us Part. The symbiote disguises itself as the red and blue Spider-Man costume, and Peter puts it on. It then turns into the black costume. Spider-Man tries to go to the Baxter Building to get help from Reed Richards, but has a hard time trying to control the suit, and it doesn't let him go there. He runs into some creeps wearing Vulture costumes, and then makes it to the bell tower of a church. The sound of the bell forces the symbiote off of Peter's body, because the symbiote doesn't like loud noises. Peter himself can't handle the bell ringing so loudly right next to him and falls unconscious. While the symbiote starts slinking away, it turns back and carries Peter downstairs away from the bell so he doesn't die. Then it leaves. Issue 101 of Spectacular Spider-Man, Echoes. It's just the one Echoes. Backlash takes some girl hostage, and Spider-Man nearly dies fighting him and saves the girl. And the cover of this has Spider-Man in the black suit, but it doesn't appear anywhere in the issue. Issue number 2 of Web of Spider-Man, Treasures. The Vulturians, a group of thieves that wear the Vulture suits, attack Spider-Man for eluding them earlier in issue 1. Spider-Man defeats them, and Peter buys a hat as a gift for Aunt May. Issue number 3, Iron Bars Do Not a Prison Make, or Vulture Is as Vulture Dies. Vulture escapes from prison and attacks the Vulturians for using his technology. Spider-Man fights them. The Vulture gets away, but the police nab Vulturians. Issue number 265 of The Amazing Spider-Man, After the Fox. A woman named Silver Sable is hunting an international jewel thief called Black Fox. He's old, and Spider-Man helps him escape to Europe where his family is, but swipes the jewel he stole and gives it to Sable. Peter and Aunt May's relationship is on the mend when they finally talk to each other again. Issue number 266, Jump for My Love, or Spring is in the Air. Spider-Man saves a man from jumping off of a building and committing suicide. The guy turns out to be the Toad, and then he gets the impression that him and Spider-Man are best friends now. Spider-Man brushes him off, and Toad gets angry and sets up a trap to show how much Spidey needs him. The Frogman hears about the Toad and thinks he's a ripoff. Spectacular Spider-Kid from a few issues back hears about this plot as well. And then when they all meet up, it's chaos. And the Frogman and Toad fight each other, then the Spider-Kid comes along and fights as well. Then they all make up and form a superhero team called the Misfits. Spider-Man is baffled by their bumbling stupidity. Issue number 102 of Spectacular Spider-Man, A Life for a Life. A girl Peter meets on the bus is hit by a drunk driver after they get off. The hospital says she needs a kidney transplant from her twin brother to live. Spider-Man finds her brother just as he's about to kill himself for unrelated reasons and tells him about the accident. He gives her the kidney and she lives. And then Spider-Man also fights and knocks out Killer Shrike, and the police nab him. Issue number 103, Compulsion. 3 college students invent a supervillain called Blaze to mess with Spider-Man and see if they can break him, though they never intended for an actual version of the villain to appear, just a fictional phantom. One of the students feels bad about it and bails out. He then contacts Spider-Man and the Human Torch to play a prank on the other 2. Human Torch pretends to be some lunatic who actually became Blaze and then challenges Spidey to a fight. They fight, and the student who's in on the prank gets burned in the crossfire. The other two then confess to Spider-Man and Captain Jean DeWolf what they did. The prankster who got burned was wearing a Fantastic Four suit and didn't actually get burned. It was all fake. And that's why you don't pretend to be supervillains. Issue number 4 of Web of Spider-Man. Dr. Octopus's mechanical arms break out of where they're being held and free him from the psychiatric hospital he's at. He vows the death of Spider-Man. Issue number 104 of Spectacular Spider-Man, The Last Race. A corrupt bounty hunter is chasing Rocket Racer to kill him for skipping bail. Spider-Man defeats the bounty hunter and saves Rocket Racer, who decides to turn himself in because he's done with his criminal life. Then issue number 5 of Web of Spider-Man. Spider-Man looks for Doc Ock. With no luck, he goes to get some shots the new city editor of the Daily Bugle asked him to get. He gets stuck there, and Doc Ock calls out a challenge to Spider-Man. When Spidey doesn't show, Ock goes back to his hideout, and then Spidey gets out of his jam and finds Doc Ock's hideout. Doc Ock fights a robotic Spidey for practice, but once he finds out it's the real Spider-Man he's fighting, he freezes up and goes comatose. The cops then arrest him. Issue number 267 of The Amazing Spider-Man. The Commuter Cometh. Spider-Man spots some guy robbing a safe and chases him, but the guy gets away. But Spidey nabs him with a tracer. The next day, Spidey follows the tracer into the suburbs where the guy lives and runs into all kinds of wacky sitcom-like antics before catching the guy. And you know, I actually really liked this issue. It was very clever, and it really showed how out of his element Spider-Man is in the suburbs. But yeah. Issue number 105 of Spectacular Spider-Man, United We Fall. A gangster named Granetti wants to buy a company called Northeastern from its parent company, Neville, to use for drug smuggling. The Wasp of the Avengers is one of Neville Industries' principal shareholders. She buys out the other 5 so Granetti can't buy it. Granetti sends Paladin to beat her up and send her a message. Spider-Man is on the trail trying to help Wasp. To be continued. Issue number 106, No Fury. Spider-Man and the Wasp, and to a lesser extent Paladin, catch Granetti smuggling drugs and get him arrested so he can't harm any of the Neville board members. Also, Star Fox makes a cameo appearance. Issue number 6 of Web of Spider-Man, Gold Rush. And this takes place after the Secret Wars number 2. But yeah, the Beyonder turns an entire skyscraper into solid gold, and then it crumbles under its new weight. As the government and Kingpin's men work at taking pieces of the building away so citizens don't just take a bunch of gold and ruin the economy, Spider-Man goes in and saves people who are trapped in the wreckage. He sees that Kingpin is aiding in the cleanup, and the Kingpin takes a few golden typewriters from the building. Upset that the Kingpin is being paid to be corrupt, Spider-Man goes back in and takes a golden notebook from a trash can. Issue number 268 of Amazing Spider-Man. This gold is mine. Spider-Man foils Kingpin's attempt to steal some of the gold that the government is dumping into the Puerto Rican Trench. Issue number 269 of Amazing Spider-Man. Burn, Spider, Burn. Former Herald of Galactus, Firelord, stops at Earth on his aimless trip through space. He decides to get some pizza, but some stupid people attack him for being a mutant. He fights back, and Spider-Man sees him and fights him. Outclassed, Spider-Man distracts him and runs away, but then decides to head back and take him on again. And I'll just say, Firelord is really awesome. But I guess pretty much anybody with cosmic powers is awesome. So, on with it. 270, The Hero and the Holocaust. Spider-Man leads Firelord in a chase all over the city and blows him up a few times, but Firelord just won't stay down. Spider-Man eventually just goes for an all-out attack on him, jumping around like a jackrabbit and landing his hardest punches on him. He knocks Firelord unconscious. The Avengers, namely Captain America, the Wasp, Star Fox, Hercules, and Black Knight, finally show up and are amazed at his success. Issue number 7 of Web of Spider-Man. Welcome. Spider-Man battles the Hulk in the Nightmare Realm to defend a villain called Nightmare who controls the realm. Spider-Man pushes the Hulk into the Madness Realm, and then Nightmare tells him he won't let him ever wake up and will keep him as a personal defender inside the realm. Then the Hulk reaches back into the Nightmare Realm and yanks Nightmare into the Madness Realm with him. Spider-Man then wakes up safe and sound. Issue number 271 of Amazing Spider-Man. Whatever happened to Crusher Hogan? The wrestler named Crusher that Spider-Man first fought after he got his powers finds out that his boss, Manslaughter, plans to beat up one of the wrestlers for quitting. Aunt May asks Peter to follow her husband Nathan because she's worried about him. As he's following Nathan, he hears gunshots and goes to investigate. He fights and defeats Manslaughter and his goons, and then he goes to Aunt May's the next morning and finds out that Nathan's in the hospital after a very brutal beating. Then she closes the door on him. Issue number 8 of Web of Spider-Man. Local Superhero. 30 years ago, a small meteor split in two and crashed into Earth. A man accidentally touches one of the pieces and gains incredible strength. Joe Robertson is tired of Spider-Man pics, so he sends Peter to Smithville, Pennsylvania to get pictures of the Smithville Thunderbolt, a superhero in a small town. Peter goes there and immediately there's a fire and he goes to investigate as Spider-Man, but the Thunderbolt saves the day. Spider-Man traces him back to his house and finds out who the Thunderbolt really is. He says his power's been fading recently and made a special suit that slightly enhanced his strength, and that he forged disasters that he could deal with. Then some guy crashes through the wall claiming he's the Smithville Thunderbolt. Peter also meets a reporter with high ambitions and takes photos of the unmasked Thunderbolt. Peter begs her not to print the photos. And I just want to say, that's pretty cool that he goes to Pennsylvania. Smithville is actually like an hour away from me, so I'll have to go there someday. It's pretty cool. Issue number 9, The Twilight Heroes. The other half of the meteor was discovered by a farmer a year ago, about the same time that the Thunderbolt's power started fading. And he's the guy who crashed through the wall wanting to kill Thunderbolt. And he wanted to kill him so that he could become him and get all the praise. But they come to an understanding, and the newly superpowered guy goes off with S.H.I.E.L.D. The reporter prints the story of the unmasked Thunderbolt, and they find a crowd outside his place who are shouting their thanks and praises at him. They go inside to find that he killed himself after seeing the paper. The filthy reporter takes a picture of the dead Thunderbolt. Some people. And then, Spectacular Spider-Man, number 107. The Death of Jean DeWolff, Part 1, Original Sin. Jean DeWolff is murdered in her apartment, shot in the chest at close range with a shotgun. Spider-Man beats the crap out of some thugs who beat and robbed an old man who lives in Aunt May's boarding house. Also, Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, represents them during their arraignment. Afterwards, he walks into a room and senses a man with a shotgun. The man calls himself the Sin Eater. He dodges a blast, and then the judge comes in. Sin Eater shoots him, and Matt doesn't take out the guy for fear of jeopardizing his identity. Issue number 108, The Death of Jean DeWolff, Part 2, Sin of Pride. Spider-Man attacks Sin Eater outside the courthouse. One guy gets killed while Sin Eater's shooting at Spidey. Sin Eater gets away, and Spidey finds out it was him who killed Jean DeWolff. He goes to her apartment and looks for clues, but only finds pictures of Spider-Man. She had feelings for him, and he wishes she would have said something. Maybe they could have had something. Also, Murdock is still upset about letting Sin Eater shoot his friend and letting him go. Sin Eater goes to a confessional and shoots the priest. And issue 109, The Death of Jean DeWolff, Part 3, He Who Is Without Sin. The Sin Eater comes into the Daily Bugle looking for Jameson. Peter knocks him out and the police nab him. Spider-Man talks to him at the station. The guy's crazy, says he hears voices and thinks he's the Sin Eater. Daredevil shows up and tells Spider-Man that they have the wrong guy. You can tell by the heartbeat. They go to the guy's apartment and discover in the next apartment all the Sin Eater gear and a tape recorder, the source of the voices the guy claimed to be hearing. It is in fact the apartment of the police officer in charge of the investigation of the murder of Jean DeWolff, the very same person that has been helping Spider-Man out. He's the Sin Eater. His next victim is Jameson, who is in Florida at the moment. But Betty Leeds is staying at his house with his wife. The Sin Eater shoots Betty just as she gets a warning call from Spidey. To be continued next year. And let me say, I'm swimming with anticipation. I really just want to get this video done with so I can read the next one. Hands down, one of the best Spider-Man stories ever so far. It's just brutal, hopeless, and just sick. And it's crazy. Kept me on the edge of my seat, and the issues went by very fast. And there was also one part in this issue that really made me laugh pretty hard. Daredevil talks to some thugs in a diner, or maybe it's a bar, but I'm pretty sure it's a diner. And he begins fighting them, and he's about to throw one of them out the window, and the owner yells, "No, not the window!" So Daredevil throws him in the other direction instead. Then when he leaves, the owner says, "For once, nobody broke the window." Then immediately Spider-Man comes crashing through the window. And it's just very funny to me. Alright, anyway. The Amazing Spider-Man Annual. Fun and games. Spencer Smythe's son, Alistair, wants revenge against Spider-Man for the death of his father. He placed a tracking device in the hat that Peter gave to Aunt May that was picked up by the Kingpin back during his fight with the Vulturians. All the way back. And then Alistair builds a new Spider Slayer. He kidnaps Anna and Mary Jane Watson because Anna was wearing the hat and Alistair thinks she's Spider-Man's aunt. Then he starts to think Mary Jane is Spider-Man and she says she is and leads him on a wild goose chase until Spider-Man can catch up with them and defeat him. Mary Jane now understands Spider-Man and Peter Parker a little more and kisses him in the end. Also, Alistair Smythe does not look anything like the 90s cartoon version in his first appearance here. He's not in a wheelchair, and he's fat with long curly hair. It's just very, completely different. But yeah, so I guess we'll see. Maybe, I guess it probably changes at some point, but whatever. On with it. Spectacular Spider-Man Annual. Ace. Spider-Man gets caught in the middle of a gang war and gets into a tussle with a neutral big shot named Ace. So that's that. And yeah, so I would say this was a pretty good year. Very good. There were some not so great issues, or some whatever, but there were quite a few that were really good. Especially this whole Sin Eater Death of Jean DeWolff story. It's just very gripping. I'm pretty excited for next year, I think, because it started getting a lot better towards the end of 1985. So I think the beginning of next year should be pretty awesome. If not the whole year, whatever. But yeah, so I guess I'll see you next time. 1986.